to launch this amazing event, because it's really important to bring the entire ecosystem together and to try to inspire more people to be interested in tech.
Yeah, and I must say, it really is an amazing event, and the energy here is unparalleled to anything else I've experienced. And I think part of the magic, too, is that we're not just talking to ourselves, right? It's not Italians talking to Italians. We also have international investors, international founders, international players in the innovation ecosystem that come to Italy and get to see everything that's happening here. So how important was it to you to have this mix of international and Italian players come together here in Turin?
Very, very important, and that's why we're trying to be every year more international and to bring more people from outside of Italy, because we think there's an opportunity here, but we need more people to invest in the country, and so Italy, it's a perfect excuse to come and see what's going on. And what we really want is to see more of these people investing and building companies here, and that's why we do this, and that's why we will have so many amazing people on stage today and tomorrow, and that's why also we have you here.
Great, thank you so much again. It's such a wonderful event, and we have some wonderful speakers, and all these themes will be central today. And without further ado, let me introduce the first speaker for this morning, and who will be able to really level set and give us an idea of everything that's happening in the Italian startup and VC ecosystem. So our first speaker is Joram Weingarder, the founder of Deal Room. Deal Room is a platform which provides intelligence about the world's most promising startups and ecosystem. And as I said, he's going to be here to give us an overview of what's happening in Italy. So welcome to the stage, Joram. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So 4 years ago, I was also standing on this stage, and I gave a presentation about the state of Italian tech. And back then, the message was, Italy needs to get its flywheel going. It was still a very young ecosystem. There is a lack of entrepreneurs, lack of big exits. There needs to be more venture capital. So it's a classic chicken and egg problem. So I thought today I will talk about what has happened in the last 4 years and where are we today. We are actually going to release a new report on this topic later this week, so check that out. And today I'm going to speed run you through what the report looks like. So as of today, Italy is the number 10 in Europe in terms of venture capital investment. So it entered the top 10. 4 years ago, I think it was somewhere around number 15, and even by number of rounds in the number 8. If you look at the total capital invested in Italian startups, it's been a rapid increase, and this year is looking to be the second highest ever, with 1.3 billion invested in Italian startups. That's a 11 times increase from 10 years ago. So, and you can see there's a consistent trend. An 11 times increase means that Italy is one of the fastest growing ecosystems in Europe, only just below Norway, but ahead of France, Switzerland, and all other countries. The combined enterprise value of all startups that have been venture-backed is now 60 billion. So that means if you compare with the Italian stock exchange, which has a combined value of about 600 billion, that's 10%. So it's already becoming a significant part of value creation in Italy, a very significant part. Also, if you look at jobs, 300 people have a job at a VC-backed startup in Italy. So it's becoming also a major, consistent job creator. And last but not least, as you can see also in this event, investors have noticed, and the investor landscape has really blossomed. Foreign funds, Italian corporates, and some new VCs also being created. So we like to say at Deal Room, the starting line is now. What you see now is a second generation, third generation of Italian founders who are starting new things. Maybe they have made their money in a marketplace or e-commerce platform, and now they're starting something new. And these new things tend to be more advanced technology, deep tech. So the biggest categories for the last several years still includes like a mix of deep tech and fintech. But just this year, you see the top categories include things like surgical equipment, nuclear fission, mobility, industrial technology, circular economy, and of course, generative AI. And you can really see that in the data. There's a major shift of investment that's going. The red part is marketplaces, e-commerce. The green part is manufacturing, so startups that actually produce physical goods, a massive shift towards that, and software. And that's the whole of Italy. On the far right, you can see just Turin, which is really strong, especially on manufacturing startups, so startups producing physical goods. Also, if the university spin-out total value created is on the rise, it's now, like all university spin-outs together, are worth more than 2 billion, which is 3 times more than it was 5 years ago. Having said that, 2 billion sounds high, but Italian universities are still far behind in Europe when it comes to creating spin-outs that thrive later, so there's still work to do. Nevertheless, Italy now ranks actually number 8 in Europe when it comes to deep tech investing. So that's given that Italy is Europe's 4th largest economy, that's closer to where it needs to be. So the starting line is now. There are 1,600 VC-backed startups in Italy. About 150 get funded each year. And there are about 1,500 startups at the early stage, and so far about 11 unicorns created. No decacorns yet. One thing that Italy is also still has to improve on is the graduation rate. So here you can see of all the startups that have raised a seed round, and what we qualify as seed round is like an institutional round between 1 and 3 million. About 18% of them graduate to Series A, and the European average is about 24%. In the US, it's over 30%. And then you can see also the graduation rates beyond that, where Italy still has to catch up, but that's also normal for a younger ecosystem. So far about Italy, and I wanted also to talk about now Italy's role in Europe, because like the Italian ecosystem is now firmly part of the European ecosystem. It's becoming a significant player. It has the momentum. So I think that now is the time also, and you see that also by the audience coming to this event. It's become way more international than 4 years ago. So I wanted to finish off talking about kind of Italy's role in the European project in terms of innovation. So over the last 35 years, globally, 29 trillion of enterprise value has been created from VC-backed companies. And the vast majority of this value, of course, comes from very, very big companies. So in the middle row here, you can see the Americas, the US basically, about 4,500 new VC-backed companies per year, which is not that different from what you see in Europe and the Middle East. But the difference is creating those very large companies, 100 billion companies in the US. There have been over 10 of those created. In Europe, only 2. When it comes to trillion-dollar-plus companies, 4 have been created out of the US and 0 in Europe. So it's time to really start thinking big. We don't need to plan the economy, but we should plan for the future. Europe really needs to plan and think big. And luckily, Draghi came with a very, very influential report that kind of seems like a turning point in how we think about these things. It's not just about the 800 billion headline. I think the far more important components from his report were about deregulation and making it easier for startups to start up. So Europe is already catching up as a whole. We're actually seeing a record 22% of all the global VC money going into European startups. This was less than 15% a decade ago. Also, across Europe, we're seeing more entrepreneurial talent than ever before, whether it's France, Germany, Italy, Spain. It's become much more common to start a startup rather than work for a large company. And now you have this second and third generation of operators and entrepreneurs who have seen success before and are just way more likely to succeed. And we're now entering also a new phase in tech, which is where Italy comes in. Of course, we are no longer in the PC era. We are also no longer in the internet era, where you had companies like Spotify, Booking, Adyen, Revolut coming out of that. We're now entering a new phase, which is more about AI. It's also more about physical tech. It's more deeply embedded in the physical world, also including healthcare, defense, manufacturing, etc. And as I showed earlier, this is where Italy is very strong. The Italian economy is not only the fourth in Europe, but it's also a world leader in manufacturing. In fact, Germany and Italy and South Korea are the top three biggest exporters per capita, ahead of the US, for example, ahead of Japan. So there is that I will put the responsibility also on the European corporate landscape to invest way more in European new technologies, because every year now about 20 billion of VC is invested in these physical tech and industrial tech startups. But European corporates spend almost $1 trillion, so 700 to 900 billion on technology. And what do you think they spend it on? It's like shitty Oracle databases and Microsoft and Salesforce. And as you know, Microsoft is a huge backer of OpenAI. So if Sam Altman comes later, you can tell him that we also funded his project. So yeah, corporates are also already doing this. The involvement of European corporates into investing into European industrial tech startups is definitely on the increase. But it's not only about being a CVC, it's also about actually partnering with startups and buying their products, even if it is still in development. This is absolutely crucial. So I kind of would want to put that message out here also, as I know that Turin has a very strong industrial sector. So finishing off, where are we? It seems like the flywheel is definitely getting there. To get it to accelerate, we should get more corporate involvement and deregulation. And like I said in the beginning, the starting point is now. And I wish you all a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Yoram. And our next panel is titled Founders Unveiled, Navigating Diverse Stages of Development, which will be moderated by none other than Matt Miller, partner at Sequoia in London, focused on early and growth stage startup in the technology space. And joining Matt on stage to cover this topic, we'll have 3 Italian founders that will be representing different stages of the startup development journey. First, we have Maria Zollo, CEO and co-founder of BAI, who recently raised a $7 million round led by Exor to build out her wearable AI assistant that listens to you so they can take notes, surface contextual reminders, and build lists. Then we'll have Filippo Conforti, CEO and founder of Commerce Layer, a composable API for commerce for developers, backed by Benchmark and Co2. Filippo's already come a long way with his startup, even having to turn down an acquisition offer by Shopify. And last, we'll have Daniele Perito, co-founder and former chief data officer of Fair. Fair is the leading online marketplace created to connect wholesale vendors with small retailers, which went from startup to an over $12 billion valuation in just 6 years. So please welcome to the stage.
It's a long and dramatic walk entrance, but good morning, everybody. We're excited to be here with you. Oh, wow, we move. This is a crazy stage set up this time, guys. Good morning, everybody. We're so grateful for the opportunity to be here. We're all here because we care passionately about Italian tech and the opportunities here in Italy for great founders and people looking to build interesting companies. And this is the first time in my life I've ever been on a rotating stage. So we will do our best to not get dizzy and have a great conversation and engage with all of you as we spin around here in the middle of the room. But joined by some incredible Italians who are building amazing businesses, one here in Italy and two abroad, but all of whom had a formative part of their start and life journey here from Italy. And I think that the best way to kick this off would maybe be to have each of you talk for a minute about the start of your journey and your career and kind of what got you interested in technology in general as a young person, and then how you made the decisions, because Daniela, you went to the United States, Maria, you went to China, and Filippo, you stayed here. And so there's like a different set of perspectives, but all are building really interesting things now with amazing Italian DNA. So Daniela, since you're right here, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so when I was about 13, my sister's boyfriend at the time, now husband, she's here in the audience, brought in like a 286, a PC, and showed me like you could like type in some basic and like make stuff happen on the screen. And I was like hooked. Yeah. And so I think I was lucky because the thing that I like to do ended up being a very important thing overall. And after that, I became one of those kids that spent his entire day just like on the computer, like programming little video games. Yeah. And so I guess my career path was set there, and then it went on from there.
Amazing. And Maria, how about you?
Yeah, I started my career moving to China in Shenzhen, working for Tencent in their video game division.
And what gave you the spark that that's where you wanted to go and do that? Because that's so different. I mean, moving to San Francisco feels like a very natural destination, much less people take the journey to China.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the thing is that while I was in university, I started to work with Tencent as a freelance. I was doing for them some translations, some localizations of video games, and as soon as I finished my degree, they asked me just to move, and I said, yeah, why not? In a week after my degree, I was there.
Okay. And Filippo?
Yeah, I fell in love with technology like Daniele with a Commodore 64 at the age of 9. Yeah. And then later on, I ended studying computer science. I started working and building e-commerce. Then in 2011, I joined Gucci as the tech lead for e-commerce development. I learned a lot about e-commerce and technology, and this is how also the idea of Commerce Layer started.
Nice, nice. And Marie, why don't you tell us the origin story of your company, Bee, and a little bit about what you're building now?
Yeah, Bee is a personal AI. I really believe that everybody will have their own personal AI that knows everything about you, but most than everything will help us to live a better life. For the reason I believe the personal context is a really big part of it, and we are doing that, building a wearable device that you can wear every day. It has, it will be like has ears and has the view of your point of life, and for that reason will help us today to be better for you.
Okay, and What was the kind of that gave you the idea, and how did some of the experiences of working for a bigger tech company like Tencent help you in your journey to become a founder and launch a startup business?
Yeah, I will say the fact that I really speak with users every day. I started to do that since I was 8. I had my first community for Harry Potter fans. It was the biggest community of Harry Potter in Italy, actually. And that experience really shaped my career because even if it was really like a game as a kid, I started to speak with users, understand what they didn't like. And indeed, like all my experiences afterwards, they were about understanding users' passion. And yeah, now with AI, I believe that it will change for sure the way how we live.
Okay, amazing. And Daniele, you worked at Square, and then were part of the founding team of Fair. And tell us a little bit about what were the things that going and working at a company like Square taught you, and then how did that translate to you starting Fair? And tell us a little bit about that experience, about why you started the company and how that came together.
There were a few things. Number one is that Square ended up being a successful business because I think they ended up taking risk with technology.
Yeah.
And I think learning where technology can really add value and having a point of view on that and knowing, okay, we can take these customers and help them with these specific technologies that will allow them to, I don't know, for ferries, not having to pay until 60 days after they order. That is extremely important. So it's like, okay, how can we use technology to help out these folks? It's a very important thing. And then from like a personal perspective, I think it's suspension of disbelief. Just learning how much impact you can have in even a bigger company if you just believe that you can.
Yeah.
And then just putting yourself out there, trying to like help as much as you can. I think that was one of the biggest things that I've learned at Square throughout my tenure.
And tell us how it came together, the founding story of Fair, because I'm not sure everybody here knows the details of that.
Yeah, so...
It started with umbrellas, right?
Yes, it did. So Max Marceau and I started a thread about in 2015 that we wanted to start something together, but we weren't clear on what. We were thinking about car insurance and that kind of stuff. Max was working on a side project to introduce a high-end umbrella from New Zealand to the US market.
Yeah.
It's called the Blunt umbrella.
Uh-huh.
And he was like, guys, I've been trying to get into like larger stores and it's extremely hard. Selling online it's difficult. Getting into small stores is extremely difficult. I think we should be doing something for this. I think it took us like a year and a half to make ourselves comfortable that was the thing. And then we just went for it.
Okay, amazing. And the rest is history, right?
Yes.
That's a hugely successful company. And Filippo, tell us about your story, about how you shared a little bit about that you were at Gucci and working on the commerce, and then you made the decision to leave and start Commerce Layer. But take a couple more minutes. That's a big leap, like a big established Italian brand, lots of history, probably an incredibly comfortable job. You had to work with lots of like fashion-forward people, very exciting, glitzy glamour, and then to make the decision to go do a scrappy startup. So what went through your mind? What was the thing that you saw specifically, and how did you get comfortable taking that leap from Gucci to doing your own thing?
I think my problem, like all tech people love technology, and when I was working for Gucci, I had to deal with legacy technology, and that was very hard to work with, to develop on top of like those type of platforms. So I wanted to build the commerce API I wish I had when I was at Gucci. So I took the hard decision. It was not easy, to be honest, because like working, I'm from Florence, and it was a very, very comfortable environment, as you said.
Yeah.
So to live and start something new. I think ultimately, you feel that fire, right, to build something, and you have to make this tough decision in your life if you want to get to something, or try at least.
And what do you think are the unique things that you need to think about as an Italian founder building in Italy?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, But we Italians are very well known for food and design, and this helps, of course.
And
I think,
cars.
yeah, and but I think we have like our roots are we are a country of inventors like Leonardo da Vinci, Volta, Gucci, and explorers like Colombo, Vespucci. So this is in our roots. So this is in our DNA. I would say that so we are all kind of entrepreneurs. I would say that so this is an advantage that we are bringing, like when building a company and by being entrepreneurs. One thing that we should learn from Americans, for example, is like the vision. When you like believing in a vision to change the world, really, because we are a country of small, medium businesses, and when you tell somebody in Italy that you are willing to change how commerce is built worldwide from Tuscany, they look at you and they say, oh, you are crazy. If you tell the same thing to someone in another country, in the US, and they say, oh, you know what, I think you can do it. So this is something that we have to learn, but at the same time, we have very unique skill set that we can bring to the entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and just from my perspective from Sequoia, just to share, I think it's great. Like, I think we're seeing this more and more, that there's many great people who take the migration and go to the US. Not so many to go to China, but that's also great. But many will go to the US and they get a lot of good experiences. And we're increasingly seeing those people, many of those people coming back to Europe to start companies. And we're seeing more and more founders like yourself that are choosing to start companies here and realizing that with Zoom and video conferencing that they have access to people just as easily without traveling. They don't need to relocate. And more interesting companies are being started in Europe. And if you think about the wave of AI versus the last wave of mobile and SaaS, there's more super interesting companies in this wave in Europe, in the AI wave, at the start of it now than there was at the beginning of the SaaS and the mobile wave. And so I think that's a really key difference. And so I think if you feel as a founder that you want to start a company and you want to do it from Florence, the reaction from the investor community is, we're super excited about that. And we're supportive of you in helping you to build that. And supportive of you if you want to do that here in Italy or if you want to do that abroad. It looked like you had a thought.
No, I think it was a very good observation that in this like AI way, we're seeing more companies in Europe than we were as a percentage.
Yeah, one of the top 3 AI labs in the world is in Paris. The best image generation model in the world is from a company in Germany. One of the best AI photo editing apps is from Paris. One of the best AI translation companies is from Germany. One of the best AI voice, the best AI voice technology is a company from London. And so, that's very different. That was not the case at the beginning of the mobile and SaaS wave. So, Maria, going back to you, you're building a company that's like squarely rooted in AI. Yes. What are some of the things that you've had to like navigate as you've built this assistant? And tell us a little bit about how it works and operates and some of the work you're doing in the AI field.
So absolutely. In the past 3 years, I was building back and forth between Paris and San Francisco. The reason why at some point I moved to San Francisco was for the talent, and because in a way it was fast, and we had already our community of users there. We started right now we're in beta. Our community is using our AI for task management. We have a to-do list, and we have an agent component where our agents do things for the users. Right now, I say we are in a beta, but we are receiving a lot of feedbacks from the users. Some of them, they use our product for memory. Others, they're using it as a personal coach. So we are just testing. We need to still find product market fit, but we are we have seen really good results. And yeah, honestly, right now, still in US, but every time that I come here to Europe, I cannot wait to ship the product here.
And what's your take on the Italian opportunity around AI? We haven't seen as many AI companies in Italy yet as the countries up north. But what's your take on the AI opportunity here at home?
Yeah,
You must have some view on it since this is your home.
I have for sure some views for the fact that, as you guys were saying before, in US, there is no idea that is too crazy. Everything actually can be built. There is as well a lot of talent, a lot of investors that, they're really welcoming, even if you're a really early stage founder and you don't have a huge background. You don't need to have big companies on your profile. And for that reason, I moved there. But every time that I'm coming here, I'm seeing more and more enthusiasm, and events like this one are actually really welcoming to that, because we are building, I will say, a culture here in Europe, and in particular in Italy, of new founders.
Awesome. And Daniele, at FAIR, how have you guys thought about building teams abroad, building teams in Europe, working in Europe? I know that you had been going to market here for a while. You do have a competitor here that you fight with for market share and are doing really well against. But tell us a little bit about how you've thought about the European opportunity as a European, went to the US, building a company from the States, now looking back.
Yeah, I think Europe ends up being the second sort of market that you look at as a US company. I think that's just a fact. And as we were choosing where to base our main office, I think that there were several considerations, like talent density, general regulatory environment, how much of a hub it is for transportation and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, we ended up choosing London, regrettably.
Yeah.
Even as a European founder, I couldn't be just like Milan. But I think that the pieces are there in Italy, and it just takes a little bit of time to show that they can come together and actually offer a fertile place for a company like FAIR or for other companies to expand into, a place like Milan or Rome.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you remote hire from many of the countries of Europe as well. How does that play into with engineering? How does that play into your strategy, and how has that been? And maybe you don't. I'm just curious.
We haven't as much historically, because we've been lucky to be in near Toronto, in Kitchener-Waterloo, where there is a huge talent pool.
Yeah.
And my co-founder Marcelo has been living there for 20 years.
Okay.
So that's given us a huge
deep-
leg up
a deep
over
network.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, because what we know in most of our U.S. companies that are just pure vanilla U.S. companies, as Sequoia, they have huge teams that are on a remote basis across Europe, and that's the thing for founders like yourself, Filippo, that are building here locally. There's a lot of people who are trained up doing really incredible things in really big established brands, not sitting in an office called Google or Meta, but they're just here in Italy, or they're in Switzerland, or they're in nearby places. And how have you found recruiting and building your team to be here in Europe? I know that you've got an American that lives in London, and you've got some others spread around. How have you found that to be?
Yeah, there is a lot of talent.
Your American that lives in London is actually sitting right there.
Yeah, there is a lot of talent here. And first, my initial my initial plan was to move to the US, to be fair. Like in 2020, when we raised our first round from Benchmark, I planned to move to San Francisco, and then that was like January 2020, and then a couple of months later, Italy was hit hard by the pandemic, and my plans changed completely. So I had to stay in Italy initially. Then let's say I didn't feel the need to move there because I really found the talent. Fundraising became a bit easier after having Benchmark here cap table. What I'm missing a lot is the networking opportunity that you have in the Bay Area, because like going around and talking about AI with the same way here, you enter a bar, you talk about soccer, makes a huge difference as a founder. So like I'm really missing that networking, those networking opportunities, even if I'm trying to stay connected to that ecosystem. But the talent in Italy, developers in Italy and Europe, are amazing. And I think also as a founder who needs to look at the cost of your company, like the balance between the cost and the talent, the cost and the quality is really interesting.
Yeah. And Maria, from your founding journey, like what are the things, so there's many people in this room who are prospective founders or have the idea or thinking about it. What are the things, the pieces of advice you would give to people sitting here today who want to eventually take the leap and start a company?
Don't be scared, and there is no right path. I believe that when I was young and I was here in Italy, I thought, oh my God, I need to do this university, and after I need to do this postgraduate, and after I need to do this internship for this company. And the reality that that's not true, especially if you want to be a founder. I believe you just need to follow your intuit. You really need to follow what is right for you. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid to fail. Just follow the path. And at the end of the day, as Steve Jobs say, like, everything will be connected. All the dots will be connected at the end. So.
Amazing. And Daniele, you're actually involved in starting a new venture right now. So you went and worked in a great company, you built a great company, and now you're involved in the starting of a new one. Tell us a little bit about that, and then some of the things that you would share with the founders here about the things they should think about in taking these risks to start a new business.
Okay, so I'll start with the latter.
Yes.
And I think, the traditional advice is find something you're good at, and find something that you love, and then just go for it.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I think the hard part is finding those things.
Yes.
And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big proponent of just like suspension of disbelief, which I think we talked about before, like knowing that you can change something, knowing that you can have a big impact. In terms of so to segue into that, I stepped down from day-to-day operations at Fair about a year ago now. And I knew that I wanted to do something sort of more mission-oriented. And I felt like to prepare for this explosion of intelligence that we're about to have, we will have to vastly improve the security of the world's software.
Yeah.
And I say that comprehensively, meaning all of the software that runs the world everywhere. I have a background in computer security, and I know pretty well that software just isn't secure. We continue writing insecure software that has bugs and vulnerabilities that can be easily exploited. And I think it is an extremely important mission to make sure that we can have reliable, secure code that can withstand this intelligent explosion. So for that, I started a team with folks from DeepMind, Databricks, Square, to tackle that problem. We're very passionate about it. We're just starting. I think it's a massive opportunity, and it's an opportunity that inspires me every day to sort of wake up and go. If you want to contribute, just I'm sure you can find my email address somewhere, and just send me an email.
Okay, amazing. And where do we send the term sheets? I'm just kidding. And what's the name of the company?
Right now, we have a provisional name.
Okay.
Patcher AI.
What? Pasture AI?
Patcher.
Patcher AI.
Like, we want to fix the world code, but like,
Patcher AI. Okay, amazing. And Filippo, you mentioned to me just before we came on stage, you're writing a book to talk about this journey, the journey of building from Italy. So what are kind of give us a minute on that and your parting words of advice for the Italian founders in the room.
I'm not writing a book technically because I'm taking notes for when I will write a book.
You're preparing to write the book.
I'm taking time, let's say, because I don't have any time right now to write a book.
Okay.
So we are not.
It was very like Italian explorer of you to like pen something while you're founding a company.
I'm really taking notes.
Yes. Okay. Great.
And so the book will be in Italian. Come nascono unicorni, how unicorns are born. We are not a unicorn yet, but I'm working on it. And during the journey, I'm learning how unicorns are born. So I also bought a domain, unicorni.org. And I published like a landing page for people who are interested in getting a free copy and just be updated when this book will be ready. Yeah. I actually put a target, like when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will start writing the book. So I'm still taking time, but again, if anyone is interested, go to unicorni.org.
Sure, I'm sure you've got a lot of people interested here.
Yeah.
And Maria, if people want to get their hands on one of your AI devices,
yes,
how do we do that? And give us like the 30-second commercial on how we should work with them.
We have a waiting list, so go on b.computer, sign up there.
Do you have one on you now? Are you wearing one? You showed it at the beginning. Yeah,
I will show you later. I actually have a beta for you to give it to you later.
Thank you.
Yes, so
The compliance team will be so glad I'm being recorded all the time.
Yeah. No, like I can explain you better, like the backgrounds and show you the demo. But yeah, go on the website. We have a waiting list there. At the moment, we are shipping in US and Canada. We have our Discord community that you can go and give us feedbacks. And yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that we got a minute left, but I don't have any other questions, final thoughts from anyone in our last 60 seconds?
Just one. Don't be scared. Do it. If you feel that fire, like, for founders, like, just do it. You have nothing to lose. You actually, and it's never too late. I founded my company when I was 40. And of course, if you do it in your 20s, it's much better, I can tell you. But it's never too late. Do it. You have nothing to lose. You have a lot to learn. So I really encourage everybody to try it.
I couldn't agree more. Those are great thoughts. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. I think we're done. Let's walk down carefully if we're dizzy.
So this next event has become something of a tradition at Italian Tech Week, and I'm honored to welcome to the stage Diego Piacentini, who's the chairman of Vento, but he's also a tech giant. He has worked for decades at companies like Apple and Amazon. He's also founded the Italian government digital transformation team. And so Diego will come on stage and he will address Vento's vision for unlocking the Italian entrepreneurship potential. He will then bring on stage Michela Andreoli, who's the co-founder and CEO of the recently founded startup Archi that was founded as part of the last edition of Vento Venture Builder. So please welcome Diego Piacentini.
It is a challenge to walk all the way here without falling. Don't worry, Michela, who's the superstar of this thing, will come up on stage very quickly. So I was listening to the previous conversation coordinated by Sequoia, and I feel like I'm going to make a soccer analogy that Italians will understand. I feel like Gattuso walking into the field after Messi. That's pretty much the way I feel. For those who don't know, there's a lot of young people. Gattuso was a very effective player, but definitely was not Messi. That's the point. So, one of the questions that we keep hearing every time is why Italy is so far behind countries like France, or if you look at the numbers, even Spain, in terms of venture capital system, in terms of entrepreneurial system, startups. There's never one reason. The fallacy of the single cause obviously applies here. There are multiple reasons. One of them, and this is the one that Vento is trying to address, is the lack of a fast, non-bureaucratic, easy way to be funded also at the pre-revenue stage or at the low revenue stage. That was totally lacking in the Italian system. It's not going to fix everything. It is not going to be the miracle, although I would call this like a little Italian miracle. And this is the numbers that I'm really proud to share with you. Vento was, keep in mind, was started like 2.5 years ago. Venture building a little earlier. So what is Vento? It's obviously part of Exor Ventures. Has an investment branch and has a venture building branch. The investment branch, which I just mentioned, goes after pre-seed and seed startup. Italian founders based anywhere, and we'll show you later the numbers of where those Italian founders are. And it gives, most of the time, 150,000 euro investment, a quick process. I say 150,000 most of the times because there have been like 10% of the cases where this amount was higher. Venture building is more about shaping the system, educating, training. It's a pre-idea and pre-team founder. So those are exceptional people that get selected to spend 5 months in Turin being exposed to amazing people, classes, experiences, and find a team, launch a startup, and get funded. So those are two things that go in parallel and sometimes do converge. So these are the numbers. We like to talk about numbers. 2022, we had a little more than 1,000 applications. We surpassed 2023 more than 2,000 applications. Those are 2,000 Italian entrepreneurs. In 2024, as of today, or 3,000, we estimate that by the end of the year, we should be around 3,500 applications. How many really got funded? So in 2022 was 23 companies. By 2023, we reached 52. We are, as of today, 78. Actually, I'm being told that as of Friday, it's going to be 80. And by the end of the year, the forecast says 97, although obviously we'd like to announce the 100. So think about this. I know these are numbers that might make the Silicon Valley audience smile, but 100 Italian startups funded in a little more than 2 years is what I call a little Italian miracle. So these are, again, more metrics to share, because this is the very important part, is the operational. It's not just about giving money. It's not just about having an idea of selection. It's about time. This is so important. Y Combinator started many, many years ago, and one of their secret sauces was speed and lack of bureaucracy. In 2012, I believe, Kima Ventures, Xavier Niel, founded something similar in France. And that's also one of the reasons why France is so far ahead. Kima Ventures, by the way, was very kind to share with us everything. So I don't hesitate to say thank you, Kima Ventures, because we've been copying a lot. Copying in business sometimes is a good thing, not inventing the wheel especially. So there's an application online. The average reply is 2.6 days. For the ones selected, you saw the numbers before. We're going to show the more specific numbers in the next slide. There's going to be 3.1 days for the first call. That's going to be a selection through a phone call. And then it's going to be 5.7 days, a second call outcome, which is obviously, if you go to the first call, it's a yes. If there's yes, you go to the second call. And if it's yes, you get financed, and you get the money really, really quickly. So decision process in less than 2 weeks, either no or yes. So here's the number again on venture building. We have seen 1.6 thousand founders in 3 editions. 110 of them were selected, which is a 7% acceptor rate, so it's a very rigid selection process, as it should be. 25 startups originated from the program, 16 of which are part of that 97 that we saw, that we hope to get by the end of the year. So 16 of them has been financed and went to raise 15 million euros, of which 15 million euros, one portion was coming from the check of Vento. And obviously also having the imprint of Vento will probably or possibly open more doors because of the rigorous selection process. We really want to build a brand for which, 5 years down the road, people will say, oh, this company has been selected by Vento. I know, again, I don't want to sound like I'm talking blasphemy, but it did happen with Y Combinator, and it did happen with Kima Ventures, and we want to aspire to do it with Vento. Build something that is really well known around the world for quality. So here is the numbers of the companies. First of all, and as if you notice, female founders do matter a lot, and female entrepreneurs. By the way, Vento is 8 people. You saw some of them on stage. 5 full-time and 3 interns. So it's a very flexible, highly automated, highly technology-driven team. 35% of the founders are female. 35 are repeat founders, which is always a great, great sign. 30% have already started a new round, so already in the second phase of collecting money. Of those 30%, some had a follow-on from Vento, and we need to solidify the process there. What kind of companies? 51% had a product, 17% had users, non-paying users, and 32% had revenue. So again, see how early we create the system. So we talked about, those are all Italian entrepreneurs, but they are not all based in Italy. 59 are based in Italy, 21% in the European area and in the UK, and 20% in the US. So it is really a global reach. So it's not just about selection, it's not just about giving money, it's also creating a value proposition. This is the hard part, because you often speak to entrepreneurs, they know much more than you do as a company that invests. So what are the kinds of value that really you can give to entrepreneurs that can distinguish the company, distinguish Vento from other activities? Again, technology-driven, I know it sounds like obvious, but Notions lack highly used tools which allow the companies to communicate very quickly. I would say that if you look at this, if there is one standing, it's a cloud credit. So we have an agreement with AWS and others to give cloud credit to the company that are part of the Vento building. I believe in those are incredibly valuable benefits. In-person meetings, tech week events, several events during the year. So it's, again, around creating, just want to use the word ecosystem, so cliche, but it is in there. It's ecosystem, so creating a system that allows those companies to grow. Now, let's hear directly from Michela. Before Michela comes on stage, I hope I see you. Where are you? Okay, there you are. Michela has done everything. It has done, first of all, she was rejected at the first selection process. She said, we like you a lot, but I don't think your idea is good or not good enough. Come back. She came back. She did the venture building program. And now she's raising funds also in the US. Michela? Stage is all yours. Before you start speaking, I want to make sure that everybody use the QR scan to learn more about investment and venture building.
Perfect.
Thank you
so much for the great introduction. I hope I live up to the expectations now. Yes, I think I was a data point on almost every slide you showed, because as you said correctly, I was part of the last edition of the Venture Builder, where Archie was born. But before that, my journey with Vento started almost 2 years ago, I think a year and a half ago. So I applied for the first time when I was still working at Google for the investment part. So I applied, I had an idea.
Google where?
Dublin. I was in Dublin, yes. So I was living abroad. Actually, I lived abroad for 5 to 6 years, Berlin and Dublin. And then I found out about this great program in Italy, and I decided to apply for the investment part, convinced that they would love me, because I was like, the idea is great. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do a call. They're going to invest. I do the call with them, and after a few days, like you said, not even 3 days, they texted me back, and they were like, look, we like you, but your idea makes no sense. So I remember finishing the call where they said, come back for the Venture Builder, we can help you, and thinking, I will never speak to them again. It's their fault. They didn't get me. So I decided actually that I didn't want to have anything to do with them. I quit my job, still convinced that my idea made sense, and I traveled to the US. My idea was in education, so I wanted to meet all the people in the universities across the East Coast. When I was in New York City, Diala reached out to me, and she said, I know you're in the States. We're also in New York City, because Exeter has an office over there. Come to the office and pitch to our managing director, Noam. And I was like, I'm going to go.
Noam is a tough guy.
Yes. I think Yala remembers that day very well, and I also remember it very well, because I ended up in that room. You need to picture this. It was my first time pitching in person. I knew that they didn't believe in the idea that much, so I tried to kind of change it a little bit from education and move to HR tech, future of work. I enter in this room in Soho, and Noam goes like, go ahead and pitch. So I pitch for like 3 minutes. He looks at me straight in the eyes, and he goes like, 2 things are very clear. The first one is that you are an entrepreneur. The second one is that you have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, good. It's better to be an entrepreneur with no idea rather than an employee with a very good idea. Somehow they like the comeback.
This is, by the way, where you need to calm down your ego.
Exactly.
You need to put your ego aside.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And I
hopefully
remember
the other person is right, but yeah.
I remember in that conversation telling him, and so what am I supposed to do? Because he said specifically this, he said, you shouldn't go into a room and say that this is your best idea, because this is not your best idea. And I was like, what am I supposed to say then? Go into a room and say, hey, I'm a nice person, but I don't have any clue what I'm supposed to build? And he was like, well, actually, if you are a very good person, we think you can be a good entrepreneur, but you don't have an idea, we do have a program for you, which was the Venture Builder. I was still not convinced, so they actually offered to have me at Italian Tech Week. So they were like, you're going to help us during the event last year, and we're going to help you find an idea, a co-founder, and actually become the entrepreneur we see in you. So I came over here in Turin last year. Actually, I was supposed to come in Turin at the beginning of September. Diala called me a day before I was supposed to come, and she said, change of plans, we're going to Sicily. And I was like, I met you once, but okay, let's go to Sicily. So I was in Sicily together with Diala, Isa, and the deal was, during the day, we work on Italian Tech Week. Around 6 p.m., we work on your company. So I remember this vividly. It was a nightmare for me, but now I'm happy about it, but it was a nightmare at the time. They had a notebook, and whenever I said, I want to work on this, Diala would start and go like, why? And then she would ask why 100 times. So I was like, this is the problem. And then she was like, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Until I had no more whys. And she was like, not venture backable. This is not a venture business. Nice idea, but we can't back it. So she actually taught me how to think like a VC. So she was like, until you come to me with something that makes a lot of sense and is very solid, we're not going to give you money. So then we did Italian Tech Week, and I remember
this was Italian Tech Week in 2000?
This was last year.
2024?
Yes.
23.
2023, exactly. So I remember I was over here in the staff in the amazing organization that runs this event. And I still was not convinced that I wanted to build from Italy. This was my, I don't want to go to Vento because it's in Turin. I was living in Berlin at the time, a more developed ecosystem. But I remember being in this.
You said ecosystem?
I said ecosystem. Should I? Okay, I'm not going to say it anymore, I promise. So I was in this room last year with Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, a bunch of great Italian founders. And I remember thinking, in 10 years, I'm going to look back and I'm going to be able to say, I was there when it all started, when the system, should we call it system? The Italian system was flourishing. Okay. And so I kind of decided, okay, it makes sense maybe to come back to Italy. Not convinced yet. I want to do another venture builder in Berlin. Took a lot of time and effort to convince me. I think they never gave up, which is really crazy.
It probably was also the right decision to go to Berlin at that time.
I had to try.
The ecosystem is much more developed.
Exactly.
They know how to grow companies. There are a lot of startups, huge AI technology based. So that was a good choice.
It was a good choice
what
at
happened?
the time. I did the venture builder and I couldn't find my co-founder. It wasn't over there. So after meeting everybody, I had another call with the Vento team and they said again, whatever you want to do, we're in. But if you don't have a co-founder, how are we going to back you? How are we going to help you? So, we still have this program in Italy. If you still have nothing, you should come and do the program. So Diala convinced me to go and have an aperitivo with her. I go. Turns out she was speaking at a university.
But that's our advantage versus Silicon Valley.
Amazing, yeah. It was.
Silicon Valley doesn't have a.
They don't have it.
I mean, they try, but it's a copy.
It's not the same thing, exactly. So I go with her, and she goes like, "I have to give a speech at the university, by the way. Why don't you come and listen to it?" So basically, you have to imagine this. I was sitting in the front row, not in the center, and she was speaking over here. She did the whole speech looking at me straight in the eyes like this. I'm looking at you. Can you imagine everybody else would be looking at you right now? So I felt like, okay, she's talking to me directly. And the whole speech was about how important it is to have a co-founder and how important it is to have somebody that supports you in your cap table. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do the bootcamps. And if I meet somebody that I like, I'll join the Venture Builder. I met incredible people. And the point is that because we don't have a very much developed system in Italy when it comes to startup, people were not passionate about startups per se. They were passionate about the most random stuff ever. So I had dinner with a guy who then was part of the Venture Builder, and he went on and on about talking how we know nothing about what happens inside of cells. And he was like crazy for biology, and he explained to me so many things, and he had an intensity that I felt so much attracted to. And so I thought, I think they are picking the right people to build companies. They all have a fire within them, so I'm going to join Vento. So long story short, because I've been talking for 10 minutes already, I did the Venture Builder.
By the way, I understand why the first time they rejected you.
Yeah, I was talking too much. Yeah. Probably. But they also called me back, so probably they also liked it.
Because there are people that talk a lot and say nothing. There are
Am I
people that
say
talk
something?
a lot and say something useful. So you
Perfect.
belong to the second category.
Amazing. That's good to hear. And I ended up in the Venture Builder. I did find an amazing co-founder, Matteo. We started working together immediately.
Where's Matteo now?
I think he's over here somewhere, I hope. Or maybe he's working because somebody has
Hopefully
to.
someone is working.
Exactly,
right there.
someone
Yes,
should be
okay.
working right now on the company. We did build a company. We're now building an operating system for manufacturing SMEs, starting from Italy. So it's going to be Italy first, but not Italy only.
So we're talking about industry. We're talking about real products that
Exactly.
are being built. Say more
Exactly.
about that.
So when we had to decide what to work on, we didn't want to build a tech product for tech people, so we actually started looking into traditional industries. Coming from Italy, we know that the manufacturing industry is a big one, it's underserved, so we saw big potential over there. It's also considered boring, so not a lot of people want to get into it, so we thought, why don't we do it? We started talking to hundreds of companies. There's a part of the Venture Builder that is called problem exploration. They don't like to do anything else until you come to them with a validated moonshot, which means you have to have a big problem you're solving, and you have to have a lot of interviews with potential customers who actually told you, yes, this problem is real. So what we understood is that however large or small the company was, everybody had the same issue, which is the information flow is broken. If you're very small because your operations are on Excel, if you're very big, it's because over the years you bought different pieces of software that now don't speak to each other. So you have the topic of interoperability of software. We saw the US coming up with something that we had in mind, which was an operating system easier with a better UX, better UI for companies. It's granular, so the configuration is easier to do for them. You don't have the issue of customization, which is very expensive for smaller companies. And we thought, well, if there's a country where you should start from, it's Italy.
This is just great. By the way, they're building something similar to this. Everybody needs to understand that Italy being the country of small and medium business, and most often more small than medium, Italy is, the risk of falling behind in industrial production is huge because the fixed cost to be able to evolve, to generate innovation are so high that oftentimes, the entrepreneurs might not have the vision, but if he has the vision, doesn't have the skills or the money to use.
Exactly.
In creating a platform that, has, I suppose, a lot of APIs, a lot of systems that can be shared and used,
Absolutely.
will definitely help the industries to grow and to scale. Now, I don't want to scare you, and I want everybody to understand that you are at the stage, you still might not be successful.
Absolutely.
You don't know. And that's the key part. Oftentimes in Italy, there are way too many experts that they think they know
Everything?
They know, right? And they tell you, they give you advice, and it's never worked here. I guess, oh, no, this is not going to work. I worked in Rome for 2 years. That's the most common phrase I heard in government. Oh, that's not going to work. No, we don't do those
Italy as
things.
well, so I heard this a lot as well.
So, but it's that you're breaking that dogma. And this is why also, what is your educational background?
I studied industrial engineering in
Okay.
Milan, and then I went to Berlin to do a master's in management.
Perfect. And, well, first of all, you do have the right background. And what is about Matteo? What's the background there?
He studied economics, and then he worked in product for PayPal, HelloFresh, and
Okay,
Pay.
so there's obviously the convergence of totally separate set of skills. But again, what I want to make sure that the message here is understood, that might not work out. We don't know whether she has 90% chances of success. Honestly, I would bet money on her, but who knows, or 10% chance of success. The point is that if she fails, she will build something else. And again, the system in other countries has been built on a large amount of companies that were, though, a much smaller number than the denominator. So for those companies that succeeded, there were like many that failed.
Yeah.
And everybody got the money. And this is also why at Vento, we are not trying to be those that are expert and trying to value an idea in terms of how is that going to work, but it's more the process that you get there. So that's why we're so much more scared about the false negative than the false positives. It's much better to be wrong by financing potentially the wrong company than not financing what can be the right company in the future. So that's, which, believe me, in Italy, this concept does not exist, but it's starting to get there now.
Yeah. And the last piece that I did with Vento, basically, we finished the program back in June. So right now, we did get the 80K from the investment committee of Vento. We then decided to open our fundraise in July. And that was a time where we heard a lot the sentence, you're not going to make it because it's summer. You're not going to raise from international investors because you're Italian. You're a first-time founder. Exor and Vento both believed in us from the very first second. 10 days after the fundraising was open, they gave us our first term sheet. We ended up raising 1.7 million in total from international investors as well. And I think I remember at the very beginning, when everybody was telling me over here, too hard, you're not going to make it, maybe, give yourself 6 months, not a month. I remember the Vento team telling me, you're going to make it. And then you're also going to tell them, I'm sorry, there's no more space in the round. And that's going to be amazing. And having somebody that believes in you from the very first moment, I think it's the best money you could raise, because it actually gives you a chance to then, risk everything when you are working and be very ambitious, because you know that, like you said, however it goes, I know they're not watching over me because they want me to succeed at all costs in the company, because there's an opportunity that, a chance that it might not work, but they believe in me as a person. And that really gives you the confidence to then do your best, regardless of the outcome, and risk it, and do crazy things, even when they tell you it's not possible.
Yeah, and to close on this, first of all, this has been a very humbling lesson also for me. But what Italy also needs, among the many things, is also making sure that coming out of Vento is going to be the next big European success. We heard on stage just before us, I can mention many, Music Smash, Bending Spoons, Saudi Space. There are so many companies around for which the system is really starting to build. And I believe that the moment that we're going to be having global success stories, then Italy will no longer be the place where they talk about the negative aspects, the bureaucracy. Does bureaucracy exist? Yes. Is it worse than other countries? Yes. But still, things can be done. And what we need to really do is create an amazing success stories. And I think that Michela is a great example. And with that, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks to Diego and Michela. It's always so inspiring to hear first-hand founder stories. But let me introduce you to our next session and our next guests. The next session will be moderated by Andri Degler. He is the head of media at T&W, and he will interview Jeanette Sue Furstenberg, who's the managing director of the global VC firm General Catalyst, and she's in charge of its European business. She's also the founding partner of La Famiglia VC, one of Europe's most distinguished early-stage venture capital platforms. And Jeanette will give us the recipe for building a successful ecosystem, drawing from lessons from Germany and France, where she's active as an investor. And following Jeanette's interview, we will also have on stage Alex Rinke, who's the founder of the German champion Solonus, who will join the conversation to provide additional context on the German startup ecosystem, and he will share lessons that can be applied to Italian context, offering a comparative perspective on ecosystem development. So I'm sure it will be a thrilling conversation. Please welcome to the stage Andri and Jeanette.
Choose your seat. Good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here in Turin. Great pleasure to be here on this stage. And today we have a great conversation for you. My name is Andri Degler. I am the head of media at T&W. I'm very happy to be here together with Jeanette Furstenberg, the head of Europe and managing director of General Catalyst and the founder of La Famiglia. Jeanette, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, for the audience, let's start with a little bit of an introduction and background. What have you been doing so far? How do you describe yourself?
Well, I think I'm a very passionate warrior for European sovereignty and technology. I think that's maybe the best way to describe myself and my journey so far. I actually come from a very traditional German Mittelstand industrial business in Duisburg, and arriving in Turin here yesterday, I got a glimpse of the industrial heritage that resides here, and I feel very strongly about reigniting our industrial base and reigniting the core strengths we have in Europe towards closing the productivity gap we currently still see to the US. And that comes mainly down to technology, right? It comes down to us really harnessing technology to the maximum in order to regain, like some of the tech market cap strength we could have, and also by that kind of have more of a seat at the table on the global scale to truly regain sovereignty. I think that's a really core point for me.
Right. It's been a very important topic indeed over the past few years. But before we dive into that, I also want to make a point. So before, in the introduction, it was said that you have a lot of experience in German and French ecosystem. But here in Italy, you also have a pretty special connection to it, right? Because you did your PhD on Renaissance and actually art and entrepreneurship during the Renaissance. So what was your connection to Italy, and how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Actually, my fund is also called La Familia, for a reason. So first of all, I think the Renaissance was a really remarkable period in Europe, right? We kind of propelled ourselves forward by 200 years ahead of our peers. And that came down to really an incredible ecosystem strength we were able to articulate at the time. It came down to creatives coming together, established industry coming together, tradesmen coming together, exchanging ideas, and thereby really combusting new ideas and combusting new innovations. And I think we are probably right now at a key leverage point to really harness our potential towards the next European Renaissance. And to me, that really comes down to mainly harnessing the power of AI. And interestingly enough, if you look at the word Renaissance, it has AI in it, right? So I feel like there's an interesting point there. And I think the key insight I have so far is Europe's biggest strength is our diversity. It comes down to the many world market leaders we have. Look at Germany, for example. We have the highest density of world market leaders globally. The incredible talent base we have, to your point on France and Germany. I think we have incredible universities. Italy is another example of that. But they don't sit only in one place, right? So talent in Europe is a lot more dispersed. So we really need to make a very active effort to bring the talent together and really connect it to many of these world market leaders we have in order to truly understand where product market fit lies and where the real opportunity spectrum is. And that's why I think events like this are so important. And I'm really glad I can be here with all of you today, because that's really where we can combust partnerships and really work towards that goal.
So is this what we are lacking at this point then? So we're not quite there yet, but both French and German ecosystems and other ecosystems across Europe have covered quite a bit of ground over the past decade, let's say. So what do you think has been done right so far, especially in the ecosystems that you know more about, and what are we still lacking then?
Well, listen, I can maybe say that a few things that stand out that have worked well so far. So I think if you look at France especially, I think President Macron has done an incredible job at really activating the key nodes that need to happen in order for tech ecosystems to thrive. So he activated the TB initiative in order to allow for more institutional capital to flow into the venture capital industry. He's been very vocal about promoting entrepreneurship. So he's been a very active defender of that. People like Xavier Niel have really stepped forward as leading examples, similar to what John Elkann is doing here. And I think you need these stories of successes, and you need to be able to dream with people that have been there and done that in order to understand what your own journey could look like as a founder. So I think these are very important points that cannot be underestimated. I think where we're still lacking, and obviously that's just a weakness we have in Europe, is we don't have these large hyperscalers, right? We don't have these very large technology companies yet. And so the question for us really becomes, how can we lean into our strength rather than be victim to our weaknesses? And I think the key insight here is, if you look at AI, it really is less of a disruptive technology. It really is more of a transformational technology. So if you think about prior technology waves like mobile, like internet, like the cloud, there was a lot of disruptive sort of potential in there in the sense that they could just open up new avenues to distribution. AI doesn't do that. AI just fundamentally gives you a way to reignite and rearticulate strengths you already have as a company, right? So the question becomes, how do we then match this talent that we have to really work on leveraging these vertical strengths we have in Europe. And if you speak to, and I'd actually love to have this discussion later with Alex from Solonus, because he's really at the forefront and sees what enterprise adoption in AI currently looks like and where the limitations are of these models currently. And I think that's a real opportunity for us to lean into. And if you think about the strength of Munich specifically as one example, which has really produced many unicorns already out of Germany, it really comes down to making sure they have a strong connection between social studies and technical studies. So the Technical University of Munich and the Social University of Munich are coming together in a program called CDTM. And that has really produced, I think, 5 or 6 unicorns already in the last couple of years. So I think there is something to be said about this intersection, both on the talent side, but also within proximity to the established industry to combust some of that potential.
Right. But then to connect two of your points you made just now. So on one hand, we do produce quite some unicorns already in Europe, in particular in Germany. On the other hand, you said yourself, we don't really have that many hyperscalers like they do in the US. Why is that then?
Well, I think there was some structural reasons for that. I think if you look at how Europe has approached the cloud, it became a politicized process. I don't know if you all remember Gaia X and where that ended. So I think there is something to be said about over-regulating and stimulating government initiatives to some degree. So I think that's something we need to be very careful with, especially at such an early stage of the technology. I was very vocal last year when the AI Act came out and rallied together a group of leaders to make sure we prevented the worst from happening, because that would have been a suffocating regulation in the form that the parliament presented it at first. But I think we're now at a place where the regulation is not deadly, but it's definitely bureaucratic. I think what we now need to understand is how do we articulate our ambition? You know, there's so much to be said about, oh, we're regulating, we're doing this, and people are always getting lost in these incremental processes. What I'm really missing is who steps forward and says, we need 3 out of the 10 largest global technology companies to be European, and where are these companies likely going to emerge of, and what do we need to do to make that happen? And I think that's something, that's a goal and a vision worthwhile putting out there and worthwhile rallying a movement behind in order for us to really leapfrog and get to a quicker scale. And I think a second point is, if you think about what I said about these vertical strengths, maybe some of that is not going to be a single company. Maybe it's going to be a group of companies and an ecosystem of emerging companies coming together to get to these trillion-dollar outcomes. And that comes down, again, to partnership. It comes down to events like these. It comes down to funds like ours, making sure you keep convening and you keep combusting some of that potential.
Right. But whose role is this to, as you said, step forward and articulate these ambitions? Does it have to be a government? Does it have to be the European government? Does it have to be a private initiative? Who has to do this?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think, first of all, founders need to do it. I think we need to allow ourselves to dream. I think there's so much over-rationalization, and I'm getting frustrated with this degree of depression that I sense from when you open the newspaper. It's all about what's not working well. Let's discuss what we need to do in order to get there. To Kennedy's point, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We can get there. I think that's kind of a thing that is needed. And that comes down to political leadership. If you look at Macron, I think he's done an incredible job at that. So he's really a lighthouse example for Europe. Others not to the same degree, I would say. But if politics fails, then I think we just need to take matters into our own hands, which comes down to entrepreneurial initiative. And I think the best founders are usually seismographic to societal change. They kind of anticipate stuff a little bit earlier. And then from there, really go and just pursue that vision relentlessly. And to give you one example, I was an early investor and still on the board, and a very strong proponent of a company called Helsing. So what they're building is basically an AI and software-enabled defense system, right? And that really kind of just builds the next generation defense capabilities. They started this company exactly a year before Russia invaded Ukraine. And that was a time where nobody felt strongly about defense, quite the opposite. It was really a topic that most people shied away from. And it was hard for them initially to kind of raise the first round of capital, even though it was just a stellar team. And a year later, Ukraine happened. All of a sudden, people understood the real need for a stronger deterrence stack from a European perspective. And they really rallied the best talent, and they managed to become magnetic to talent that was European at the core, but was residing in the US or working at US firms. To give you an example, like Antoine Borde, who's leading the AI efforts, he was previously the head of the Fair Lab of Meta, which is basically their AI division. Robert Falk was the head of engineering at Palantir. This is European talent that has been dispersed towards US companies, but that came back and really with a mission and a purpose to build towards European sovereignty. And what we're seeing here is that this company is not only really incredibly successful, they were the first company ever globally in the history of time to gain a program of record within 2.5 years into their existence, which just tells you of the strengths they have. But at the same time, they kind of really were able to harness the potential of our talent base, the potential of the existing industrial base. So they announced a huge partnership with Saab. They announced a huge partnership with Airbus recently. So there's a lot of these elements that I'm talking about that are coming together. And in my view, this company really has the potential to become a global category leader. This is an example where we're saying, I don't see a company in the US doing the same thing.
Yep.
So that's one example. If you look at Mistral, and we have Arthur on stage here later today, it's a similar example. These are 3 amazing researchers that are European, that were working at DeepMind and at Meta, respectively. They were responsible for really ideating and pushing that frontier of the transformer architecture. And then they actually came out and said, you know what, we want to build towards open source for Europe, which means also building for enterprise and building for core European needs. In their open source approach that they're articulating within Mistral. And I think what we need to do now in Europe is make sure these companies combust, right? These companies really make it big. And that comes down to enterprise customers leaning into a European champion, leaning into that as a customer. And so far, that's showing really great results. And I think we just all need to also, lean into the dream where that could take us, and make sure we get there. I think that's an important point.
But this collaboration between bigger enterprises, traditional manufacturers, traditional industry companies with startups, is it something that you see having already picked up across Europe and in France and in Germany and perhaps in Italy, if you have this knowledge?
Yes. I mean, if you look at, for example, a couple of examples from our portfolio, Applied Intuition. What do? They do essentially start up with simulation, but the way you want to think about them is that they're basically building a tier 1 supplier that's software-based for the automotive industry. Huge market in Europe, huge potential in Europe. Their goal was to say, I want to empower every OEM in the world to basically have Tesla-like capabilities without necessarily being able to attract the same software-based engineering talent that Tesla was able to attract early on. And so we actively guided them and helped them towards winning large OEM contracts, and that is working really well. They just announced a huge contract with Porsche, for example, and other large European car makers. And that is basically a way for them to really buy the capability set, to really make sure they can make that shift from a sort of more hardware-defined system to a more software-defined system. And that's where the partnership then really leads to a potential reignition and augmentation of one of our core European industries.
Right. And when you say about the greater talent pool that we have in Europe, and also about founders who could take things in their own hands if the government fails to do so, I do think that a lot of them have done so already, but they did it by moving to the US. Is there a way to prevent that for Europe, in your opinion? Like, how do we stop the founder drain, the general talent pool brain drain? Like, how do we create a better environment here for that?
Well, listen, I think it comes down to a couple of things. First of all, the fact that talent goes to the US is, first of all, a good indicator. It just means that they're ambitious. And I think if there's one thing to be said about the US, they just really work incredibly hard, right? So I think that's just, if you have that pattern of a smart founder, educated in Europe, working at a US company, it means that they're smart, it means that they're ambitious, it means that they have seen scale, what we should work on is getting these people back, right? And that comes down to giving them the resources they need. So meaning, like if you look at General Catalyst, we, like one of the reasons that I merged my firm, La Familia, which primarily focused on the early stage, with GC and now taking over the helm in Europe, it really came down to me wanting to make sure we have all the resources, all the toolings, like the founder solutions from the capital side, but also the platform access and everything it takes to make these people successful here. And so we're actively hunting to get talent back from the US. Whoever's in the room who's willing to do that, let me know. We want to bring these people back. And if you look at our portfolio, the most successful founders have that archetype. Look at Torsten, for example. He was his first startup actually took him to the US for a while. We look at the Mistral guys, they work with US companies. And there are many, many more examples like that. And so I think that's actually a really good archetype of founder profile to bring back.
Okay, interesting. And I think it's been talked to death by now. But still, do you have an opinion on the Draghi report? What do you think should we do out of the range of things proposed by him? What is the most important for you if you look at it?
Yeah, well, I think I haven't read the full 400 pages. In all honesty, I think I read the summary. But I think what I liked from the report is just an articulation of ambition. And just kind of directionally saying this needs to happen now. And I agree with that. I don't think we have another 10 to 15 years to waste. Because if we lose out on this AI opportunity now, it will take us a very long time to recover from that. Because if you think about the structural avenue we're in right now, on average, our European population growth is flattening out or declining. And in the history of time, there's never been a productivity growth without population growth. So these two curves that are diverging, the question comes down to how do we close, what makes us close that gap? And that for me comes down to really AI and really leveraging and leaning into that to the largest degree possible to really close the productivity gap. And I think that comes down to, I'm not a big fan of these government initiatives he's pushing, because I don't think the government is necessarily a good entrepreneur. It's not supposed to be, right? Oh. So the good entrepreneurs are here in this room. These are the people that need to then actually lean into that. This comes down to mid-cap businesses really embracing and trying to learn about what AI can do to their business. And quite honestly, the thing that excites me most about Europe, if you look at all these Mittelstand companies, right? I'm fifth generation in my family business. And these are usually really pulsing, beating entrepreneurs. They're passionate about their product, they're passionate about their market, they're passionate about their customers. And engaging with these people on the case of technology is usually very rewarding. These are not managers. These are not people that think about, oh my God, what if I take on that technology, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. They come together with young founders typically because they really want to harness the potential of their own business to the max. And that is, I think, a really, really great strength we have. So I see a lot of these examples already at play in many different instances. And that's actually what really gives me hope as well, because you have real entrepreneurs that are taking a wholesome view, that are leaning into innovation, have always done so. And this is now the next innovation curve that just needs to be embraced and understood. And yeah, so I think if you look at, take Mistral as a model, right, and making sure that Mistral then finds its articulation in these vertical strengths in collaboration with established industry, it would take us very far.
It does require quite a bit of money, though, in order to scale. And I have heard on many occasions from very different people from both the entrepreneurial community and VCs and government policymakers that we are struggling to provide enough funding for the scale. And this is a big reason why people decide to move on and go to the US, where there is an abundance of capital at this stage as well. How do you see that being solved? It's not something that we can solve within a half a year or a year just by dreaming of it.
Well, what I can say is, and we have Alex on stage very soon. He has raised a lot of capital for his company, which is a global category leader out of Munich, out of Germany. And we see the same thing happening. We just announced a $500 million round into housing. We announced a $500 million round into Mistral. So I think we have capital available for these global champions to emerge. I think they may not be as much at scale capital yet, but that's also why I merged, for example, with GC, and we have, like billions earmarked for Europe over this fund cycle, and I really want to make sure we harness that and really, just get our act together and move towards this ambition I articulated of making 3 out of 10 global technology companies be European. I think that's a cool goal.
Yeah, and we will ask Alex why is that he actually lives in New York these days. So it's that's enough probably of talking about Alex in the third person. I think it is time to invite our third panelist, second panelist, the third participant of this panel today, Alex Rinke, the co-founder and CEO of Solonus. Alex, please join us.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Great seeing you. Thanks so much for joining. So, Alex, can you also give a quick introduction of yourself? What it is?
Yes.
What's your background? What it is that you're doing, and why do you live in New York these days?
Okay. Good. Perfect. Happy to do that. We said earlier I have a boring CV because I only had one job. Started Solonus in 2011 out of college. Went to college in Munich, Technical University of Munich. And Solonus makes processes better for people, for companies, and for the planet. So we help around 50% of the top 200 companies in the world and many, many more customers than that to really optimize their most important business processes, supply chain, finance, customer service, and drive efficiency, drive sustainability, drive a better environment for their people and for their customers.
Great. And you are basically a mathematician.
Yes.
By trade.
By training, yeah.
Do you still get to use math in your daily?
A little bit, yeah. No, I do. I mean, look, not as much as I used to, but what we do has a lot of relationship to math because it's based on algorithms. And yeah, recently with LLMs, etc., I got a little bit back to my roots, understanding these new developments. So yeah, a little bit.
Great. So can you give us a little bit of a history lesson, if you will? So the year is 2011. What is it like for someone just out of college to start a company in Germany?
So,
namely in Munich, right?
Yeah, in Munich, exactly. So actually, there's a few funny twists about my story or our story. I actually grew up in Berlin. And a lot of startups back then got started in Berlin, but we started in Munich. So I think you talked about that too. So we can go back to that. I mean, back then, first of all, when I went to university, I never had the idea of starting a company. It didn't even cross my mind, right? I was just interested in my studies and all that. But what was really interesting, and it sort of caught my attention when I joined TU Munich, their motto back then was, I think it still is, the entrepreneurial university. Right? That was their motto, and that was pretty cool.
And that was already in the end of 2000s.
That was, yeah, exactly, in the late 2000s. And that's really when almost no startups got started in Munich, and very few in Germany, right? It was sort of coming off of this boom in the early 2000s where there was some real activity, and then before this recent boom, right? So that was really the drought in terms of company creation. But the TU Munich back then had multiple programs, and they have many more now, to help students get involved with businesses, do projects with businesses. Actually, Solonus was born out of one of those programs. And then we were also funded, I mean, it was only 80,000 euros, but it was a lot for us back then, from the Exist stipend, which is a European initiative. So I would say it shows you how important this infrastructure is, right? That we had at the university and then also with the European Union.
Yeah, that was my point exactly. Look, Jeanette, this is a great example of what we just discussed.
Yeah.
And so what's your journey been since then? How was it developing?
Well, it's been almost 15 years, so it's been a crazy story. But the company has grown a lot. We are almost 3,000 people. We've created a new category, right? So a lot of companies, they do something that already exists and they do it a little bit differently. We have created an entirely new space. And in many ways, we're just getting started. So, we have the same energy that we had when we started almost 15 years ago.
Great. So back to that point then. So why did you decide not to start a company in Berlin?
Well, back then so we were very different in terms of, we didn't go to a lot of these events. There weren't a lot of these events actually. And back then we didn't think about where the VCs are or where the panels are or the startup hype is. We thought about where our customers are. And when you start an enterprise software business out of Germany, then you have, obviously you notice very quickly, there's a lot of customers in the southern part of Germany. So even though I tried to pitch Berlin a little bit, as a Berliner, my co-founders were like, well, we need to sell software, otherwise we can't survive. So it's a much better environment to sell software down here. And we haven't looked back. I mean, Berlin is a great city, but I think for an enterprise software company, I think Munich is a great location.
So is this how the ecosystems should be developing now? So is it going to be indeed gravitating towards where the customers are? Is that what you see as well, Jeanette?
Well, I think any business needs to focus on its customers, right? So I think that's definitely
it is
definitely a recipe for success. And I think like what you have in Munich, and I think we just alluded to that, you have this incredibly strong talent base coming out of Munich, etc. So I think what these guys have done is just incredible because, to my point earlier, they've just they were very visionary in the way that they anticipated this new category to unfold and exist. And there wasn't a lot of applause, right, in the beginning. Like, it's not that VCs were banging on your door in the first 2-3 years and said, hey, take my money. You were kind of just really focused around just making the business work. And now you're at a point where you really have captured the global category. And that's a great example of like a German company really taking the global stage and really leading us towards that goal of a global category championship.
So that's actually a good point. We didn't have any capital. We had the stipend, which paid us a salary for a year, 2,000 euros a month, and then we didn't have any VCs. We tried to pitch some, but they didn't really understand what we were doing. And they also said, well, you're too young to start an enterprise software company. Enterprise software companies is for people like me now with less hair, and more experience. So we didn't have any capital. And I think in hindsight, obviously it would be better if we had capital, but it also helped us to focus on our customers. And that's what I recommend all the startups today, where there's so much, attention. We had no attention, right? But there's so much attention. And it is important that attention is not becoming a distraction, okay? Because if it becomes a distraction, you're building a product so it looks cool in a VC pitch, right? Or that's like a great AI story, but isn't real. That's not going to succeed, right? Ultimately, you need to create substance. And you need to create substance by working with your customers. So that's very, very important, I think. And when you're bootstrapped, you have this sort of drive to survive, right? You have customers, you can't hire people, etc. So I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but for us it worked quite well. And I think that some companies can also get too much funding early on, right? I think it's important to always have a healthy balance and really do what's right for your customers.
But then time had passed and you still had to go to the US first to raise funding. How did that go?
Oh yeah, that was funny. So in 2015, we tried to go to Silicon Valley to pitch VCs. And I think this is also something where, Europe has a unique strength in enterprise software because there are certain domains that I think we understand actually better than Silicon Valley companies. And one is enterprise process, right? That's a very European topic, right? And you could say a very German topic in some ways. So when we came, we had amazing metrics back then. We were bootstrapped, we were profitable, we were growing very fast. I think almost 10 million in revenue. So usually on the face of it, we should have easily gotten funding at that stage. We'd been going for almost 5 years at that point, and all VCs rejected us. We went up and down Central Road, and nobody wanted to fund us. They're like, these weird German process guys, I'm not sure that's real, that's a real company, even though we had amazing metrics and great customers and all that. And then later on, now we have obviously a mix of European and US VCs and funds. But actually, in our category, Europe caught onto it before the US did.
So we're going to write it down then. Europe is good at boring topics that nobody in the US yet understands.
It sounds boring on the surface. It's actually very exciting, right? Because, we work with, for example, the NHS, right, in the UK. They have a lot of problems with delivering great healthcare. And we've been able to help them cut their waiting times down. That's one of the biggest problems of not just...
It is.
Organizations is one of the biggest problems of the country, right? So we can actually have a big impact with those topics. They might not look as shiny in the very first surface, you know.
Right.
But maybe I'd love to just pick on your experience. What are you seeing an enterprise adoption on the AI side, and how are you kind of involving that into your own company right now?
So, first of all, I think that currently the way companies, especially big enterprises, use AI is still, so you have to differentiate, right? There's traditional AI, machine learning, a lot of use of that, right? Then there's generative AI, okay? So generative AI is still very superficial, the use of it today. So things like drafting emails for salespeople, helping with customer service and communication. So very like communications-heavy processes. And it's not really embedded in the enterprise workflow. It's not helping you plan your supply chain or make better decisions, things like that.
It's a black box, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Because it's a black box, because you can't.
It's a black box,
You can't
correct.
explain why it makes decisions.
Like you don't learn that stuff on the internet, right? The generative AI models are very good at things where they've seen many examples on the internet. So in the enterprise process, that's where we think we can play a very big role. You need a data and knowledge foundation to attach generative AI to really help you with processes that goes beyond simple productivity tasks. But we think it's going to happen. It's going to take a little more time than people hope. But ultimately, it's going to help us automate aspects of our businesses to a much higher degree than today.
Right. By the way, just out of curiosity, do you still consider yourself a European company?
What do you mean?
Do you still consider yourself a European
company? Of course.
Company?
I mean, we consider ourselves a global company, but we are from Europe, you know, and that's where we started. And, you know, we have a big base in Europe, both customers and people, and that's very important to us. Yeah.
Right. Janice, you were saying?
No, I just think what you're saying is very interesting. So it makes the point of what I sort of alluded to earlier, is that Europe has a lot of the deep sort of vertical understanding of all the different industries. And like, it's not that easy to come outside in and just kind of, you know, create a product if you don't actually understand the industry dynamics inside out. So that's where I think the real amplification potential is from a European AI perspective.
And I also think 100%, and I think actually if you look at sort of how AI is going to move GDP, I think that the B2B space is going to be a big part of that. So I think we have a huge chance there. And one thing that makes me mad, actually, I have to say this, you know, some people say, well, in Germany and in Europe, we don't have an entrepreneurial culture. That's our problem. We don't have an entrepreneurial culture. We don't know how to build companies. We don't want to take risks. And, you know, there was a whole founders epoch not that long ago in Europe, right? And in Germany particularly. So we absolutely have the culture. We maybe have to be a little more courageous sometimes and need to create better infrastructure. There's a lot more today than when we started, but I don't think it's something inherent to Europe that we...
No, I mean, I've been around for a while, and I've been hearing this point about us not having an entrepreneurial culture, not dreaming big enough, not having the ambition for at least 15 years now, I think.
But I think there's also a different point that you're alluding to, which comes down to ecosystems that are kind of combusting around companies like yours. So if you look at, actually, a lot of founder pitch decks I look at that are early stage companies name Solonus as their first customer, right? Which is a similar pattern that made Silicon Valley big, right? It came down to these companies quickly finding early customer adoption from entrepreneurs that have just been there, done that, and are eager to lean in. And I think that's another fact that makes me very hopeful for Europe, is that we have more of these large successes, decacorns like Solonus, that are really kind of supporting the early sort of, you know, process of companies that are just going to market. And I think that's another point in the ecosystem that we are now slowly building, and that is strengthening our core.
Yeah. And in the category that you basically have created, do you feel now a lot of competition coming from elsewhere? So from the US, from China, perhaps? I don't really know.
Not that much yet, actually. But of course, as the category grows, you actually want to have some competition, because otherwise you're not creating a category, right? You're just doing your own thing if nobody cares. But it's balanced, right? There's competitors from Europe and from the US, so I wouldn't say there's a particular difference. Yeah.
Right. And how do you approach the talent question? We have talked about talent a lot with Jeanette already. So do you see the issues with the talent in Europe, in the US? What is the difference? What's it like for you?
Well, first of all, I think talent is really critical if you want to build a company, and hopefully, I mean, I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs here. You know, you better really spend a lot of time interviewing, referencing. You know, bad hires cost you a lot of horsepower. So I think that's critical. I think that the education system in Europe is very good.
Yeah.
So obviously it could be a lot better, right? But compared to the US, I think we have actually very strong, education, computer science, and math, and also our academic institutions can really compete. They might not be as well funded on the very top level, but overall, in Germany, you can go to a B-tier city, a C-tier city, and get a good education in a topic like math. And we hire people, and we think they're really good. And it's not necessarily that people in the US have a better education. I would say on average, it's actually worse. You have some of these peaks, but they are also not that much better than the top European universities. So I think that we have a lot of talent in Europe. That's probably our number one strength. Okay. The second thing that I would say is that in Europe, the culture on employment is a little bit different. So people usually tend to stay longer with companies,
Absolutely.
which is very important and very good. A little bit, I would say, sometimes in the US, it's easier to attract someone to an entrepreneurial opportunity because they've seen companies go public and be successful. Especially in the early days in Germany, we always had, when we wanted to hire a young professional, we were telling them join Solonus, and their parents were telling them join Siemens. So, join a big company, do something real. It wasn't necessarily cool. But I think that shifted a lot. So I think you find great talent in Europe. You actually have a lot of US companies that hire engineering hubs in Europe because it's a little bit cheaper. So I think in terms of talent, we have a great opportunity here, and I don't see that it's necessarily worse. Of course, if you look at very experienced executives, for example, there's certainly a smaller ecosystem here, but it's also growing. We have, I think, 12 founders of companies that were ex-Solonauts, we call them Solonauts or Solonus employees. So, that's not bad, and those folks have gained experience with us, and they're going to do great things now, hopefully, with their own companies. So,
yeah, that was the point that I also wanted to make. This kind of a flywheel of the ecosystem when people just get some experience in a successful startup that can be a role model afterwards, and they just go on and do it themselves. But are there perhaps ways to have to do even more of that? Like, how do you encourage people to be entrepreneurs? Is it even possible?
Well, I think you need more storytelling, to your point. I think you need more folks like Alex step forward, tell their story, and encourage people to do that, to our point earlier. But I think there's actually a really interesting, broader sort of philosophical element to this. If you look at the way European talent is educated, it doesn't only come down to universities. It also comes down to just the richness and the density of our culture. When you walk on the streets, you hear 5 different languages, you look at all these different nuances of building architecture that has lasted over centuries. So there's just a lot more inherent heterogeneity baked into our thinking. If you look at the US, it lends itself to scale, right? It's really just this giant market, very heterogeneous. If you walk down, Palo Alto, most houses look the same. It's just there's very little that your eye holds or nuance that you get to capture as an individual. And if we really think what innovation comes down to, it comes down to intersection of thinking. It comes down to how do you read nuances? Where do you see opportunities? Where do you lean in? And interestingly enough, if you look at most of the research that's happening in the forefront of AI, a lot of that is driven by Europeans. They may not be in Europe, but they are European at the core. So I think there's something to be said about the strength of Europe when it comes to just innovative thinking. And I think what we have to become better at is just applied research taken to product as a jumpstart.
And one thing that's important, I think, when it comes to, first of all, the venture capital infrastructure is still much, much more advanced in the US than in Europe. And even if you go back, like the founders epoch that we mentioned, for example, right, there was great capital infrastructure. It was banks back then and not VCs, but there was great capital infrastructure locally. So that's really, really important. And I think the German government is doing some things, and there's people like Jeanette and others, but we really need more capital. I mean, Europe is still very wealthy. We need more capital to go into earlier stage companies. The second thing we need to do is we need to change our attitude when it comes to risk and failure a little bit, right? So that's one thing maybe where the US has an advantage culturally, where it's like you can fail 3 times and it's okay. You're still going to get invited to the breakfast in Silicon Valley or whatever. You won't get sort of excluded. And I think in Europe, we still sometimes have not the right attitude towards failing. So I think we should embrace any founder, whether they succeed or fail, and we should celebrate them for the risks that they take. And I encourage all of you, don't be worried too much, whether it's in your career or in your own business, to fail. That's natural.
Right.
We actually believe that the best talent might not succeed the first time around, but it won't fail. So like usually like second or third time founders is that's when they hit the success stride. So
Takes a ton of luck, you know, the right moment, the right team, the right product. So the
You are a lucky person then.
oh, very, very. No, I seriously. I mean, hugely. I mean, you know, I think that some founders think they're smarter than they are, right? I mean, you of course you need to work hard and all that, but you need a ton of luck.
Right. So we have like 30 seconds left to wrap this up. Let's get back to the topic of this initial conversation, the recipe for a successful ecosystem. If you are looking at the Italian ecosystem, for example, today, what would be the recipe? What needs to be done? What are the pitfalls? What would you like people who build this ecosystem to take away from this conversation?
I would say it's routing the best talent to the most important problems, fueling it up with capital, and then creating a movement towards big ambitious goals.
Right. And the entrepreneurial take?
I think it's all about courage and supporting anybody that wants to start a company. It's also very important, we didn't talk about that much. If you're a corporate, there's lots of very good companies here in Italy. Help, if you see a startup, help them, right? Buy their product, try it out, give them a chance. I think if we give each other a chance and we have courage, we are unstoppable.
If you see a founder, hug them. Now, thank you so much, Jeanette, Alexander. It was an amazing conversation. Thanks a million, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Please give a big round of applause to Alexander Rinke and Jeanette Zufusenberg.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And with this next panel, we'll continue to look at the ecosystem from the perspective of a curated group of European venture capitalist investors who will reflect on how to unlock Italy's startup potential. So we're keeping the themes coherent throughout the sessions. And let me call on stage for this session Andrea Gennarini, the co-founder and managing partner of 2100 Ventures, an early-stage venture capital firm that aims to strengthen the connection between Italy and the European venture capital ecosystem, who will be moderating the panel. And participating in the panel with him, we have Alessandra Mazzilli, early-stage investor at Early Bird, who follows the Italian market for the fund and is focused on early-stage investments. We also have Alessandro Luciano. He's the vice president at Inside Partners, leading much of the firms investing across Europe. He's also made already a significant investment in the Italian startup ecosystem. He has led Uno Bravo's $17 million round. And last but not least, Gelsomina Vigliotti, vice president of the European Investment Bank, who through the EIB has invested over $1.3 billion in Italy in 2023. So please welcome them to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Whoa. So super excited to be here. I really care a lot about the topic of this panel and super excited to share a lot of thoughts with the two Alessandres and Gelsomina. So first of all, how many founders are in this room? Can you raise your hand? Fantastic, quite a bit. So this panel is also for you. So hopefully you will get some nice insights. So, ciao Ale. We know since a few years already, we've been talking about this topic quite a bit. What I would like to ask you is there's such a broken communication between the Italian tech ecosystem and the rest of Europe and the US, of course. You recently joined Early Bird, which is a successful continental European VC. What I would like to ask you is, what VCs, international VCs, they don't get about the Italian startups, the Italian founders, the Italian tech ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's actually two things that are very opposite to each other, at least from my experience. I think one thing is related to not just Italian founders and Italian opportunities, but also our international portfolio wanting to expand to Italy. I think it's very much underestimated how there is a preference for Italian companies, Italian enterprises to prefer Italian suppliers and have a very, very personal connection. So I think there are a lot of international companies in our portfolio as well trying to expand to Italy and finding it very tough because the go-to-market ends up being completely different because the way you approach your potential customer is completely different. It's a much more personal, maybe more phone call related type of approach, which does not sound as the most appealing and scalable as a venture capitalist, but it's exactly what I think works the most for Italian enterprises. And I think this is underestimated also when it comes to founders, Italian founders wanting to build a business here. I think they actually have a great advantage in their local market to find great partners to test their products with because of this tendency of favoring Italian suppliers, even though at the beginning they might not have the best-in-class solution, which is often the case at early stage. When I invest, there's barely an MVP, so you clearly need to find allies to work with you. And I think this is talking about the positives for once, right? This is probably one of the positives of the Italian ecosystem. And I think on the and there are big enough markets sometimes to expand in Italy, which is also something that I think international investors might disregard because they're like, oh, you don't want to internationalize. So that means that the opportunity is not big enough for me. And actually, there are opportunities in Italy, if we look at the SMB space, for instance, where you can actually build a quite sizable business just by staying in the Italian ecosystem. So I think this is one thing. The other thing, which is exactly the opposite, is there are some markets that are very much underdeveloped here. Like we are like today in Turin in this amazing tech conference, but this is not our everyday life in Milan, for instance, when we are in town. You're not in Berlin, like every two people work in tech, so you always are surrounded by people who work in tech. Here, it's actually the opposite, unfortunately, today, but this is changing rapidly, and I think this is good on the other end if you're building a very, like, I don't know, an AI agent, which is something that I'm looking a lot at today because it's the hot topic in the market in 2024. And if you're building such a product, you have very few customers to test it with in the Italian ecosystem, just because the level of digitalization is maybe lower than Germany or France or the UK. And I think this is actually can be an advantage. Because you have a smaller market to test it with, first, and second, you have to think international from day one. So you cannot restrict yourself to the people that you know here, but you really have to think of scaling the business right away, which I think could also be an advantage for a founder. It's tougher, but like venture capital funded businesses are not easy to build. So having this mentality from day one, I think really can help founders.
Thank you so much. Let's work on that. You're covering Italy for early bird, so luckily you're bringing up this mentality. Ale, at Insight Partner, you did your first investment in Italy a couple of years ago. In Uno Bravo, you led the Series A. It was like a really big Series A. What I would like to ask you for all the founders here is like, how actually did you get the deal? How Daniela, the CEO, and the company, you get actually the pitch and they arrive to you, to Insight Partners?
Totally, yeah, I'll tell you the real story. So I met Daniela in 2021. I had just moved to London from New York. And as I was packing my bags, I made a list of themes I thought made sense to invest in Europe. And I had mental health on the list. I had climate, I had privacy, and a few other things. And mental health was on the list because we had invested in a couple of companies in the US that did really well. Calm, the meditation app. And then there's a company called Alma, which does online therapy. And when I looked at Europe, particularly continental Europe, I saw the same situation for patients, right? The same difficulty in accessing therapy. But on the provider side, there were basically no providers that were doing an online-first, very accessible experience. And so it's in that context that I just decided I would talk to all the mental health providers in Europe. So I emailed everyone, and that's how I met Daniela. And our first meeting, I remember, was in London on a Saturday at lunch. And it was her and Greg, who was somewhere in the audience. And, you know, I came with not knowing what to expect. Daniela was a first-time founder, not just that, but she was a first-time business person. She was a psychologist before starting Uno Bravo. And she had only raised 200K from some local Italian investors. And so I came in with relatively low expectations. Obviously, that changed the moment I met her. And at some point during the conversation, I asked her for her numbers. Like, how is the business performing? And when she told me, I asked her to repeat it and talk slowly this time. And I said, but what do you mean by revenue? And what do you mean by this word I've never heard, EBITDA? And so it was actually obviously off the charts. And keep in mind, I had met a lot of the other players in Europe, and so I had the benchmark, and I knew that there was something absolutely special here. And I'm a growth investor, so I have the privilege of having these benchmarks. And so, I mean, basically, I think you asked me what advice I would give to founders who look to attract international investors. The first thing I'd say is don't worry about networking with VCs. Just worry about building a business that looks great by global standards, and we will find you. That's my job. And a lot of investors will say, oh, you need to have an international team, you need to have international revenue, you need to have a seed investor that has connections with London, with New York. All of those things are helpful, but they don't actually matter unless the business is great. So I think if you think about Uno Bravo 2.5 years ago, the team was all Italian, 100%. We basically had no international revenue, 1%. And they had no international seed investors, and yet we met them, we saw the potential, and we saw the evidence for the potential, and that's why I'm here. So,
thank you so much, Ale, for sharing this. We're actually real VCs, they meet founders, and it's not only networking, going to events, but it's also like doing real job and make revenues, and then you guys actually hunt them. Ciao, Gelsomina. So the role of European Investment Bank, it's super key to the European landscape. Since 2000, you invested in innovation more than 270 billion. You invested only in 2022 20 billion euros in innovation. You supported indirectly more than 50% of European unicorns, such as Zalando, Spotify, Skype. My question for you is like, what's your role now, and what's your expectation regarding Italy, and how do you expect to support also the Italian tech ecosystem to flourish?
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting us, and it's not Pluralia Maiestatis, but because I'm representing this European institution and all the colleagues that work on the field. The EIB is a group. There is the bank, which is the European Investment Bank, and there is the European Investment Fund. So we can support the venture capital, but also the private equity and the innovation, in particular innovation through different systems, through different instruments. The first instrument that comes through the bank, it's an instrument of venture debt. We are just talking about, we are talking about investment of at least 7.5 million in firms which have already concluded the first round of financing. And, we invest there with a patient capital, which is the venture debt that you know better than me. Is a patient capital that accompany the companies, to develop and to flourish. We are a public institution. We are funded by the European member states, so we pursue, public goals. And to us, what is important is to invest not because of the financial return, but actually, financial return is important, but because we believe that the financial returns is also associated with the public goal, like innovation, and we know how relevant is innovation for growth in Europe and to allow Europe to stay within the international scenario with strength and continuing, pursuing the real values that we have in Europe. Because, we are a public institution and our role is that not, only to support business. We want to support business because it can add value. And we invest where we see the opportunity and where we see that the private capital is not sufficient to allow this company to develop. And what is important to us is also the impact, what we want to see at the end of our investment. And our data, what shows that after our intervention with venture debt, we have companies which can achieve certain results, but that overall they have a financing structure which is ready to, to bring in other investors and potentially to go to the market, because in the end the objective is to enlarge the, the business. Then we have the EIF, which is the European Investment Fund, which is a fund of funds, and we invest in fund. And the role of the EIF, I think it's, again, we are a public institution. This is a partnership with the European Commission, the bank, the European Investment Bank, and also 10% of private investors, which are the main public development banks, and also some financial institution, private financial institution. And also there, it's the role of the EIF is to contribute to develop an ecosystem. To develop an ecosystem where actually it's the venture capital, the private equity can flourish. We know that in many parts of Europe, there are, some countries where there are already well-developed markets, but there are markets like, for instance, in Eastern Europe and also some part of Italy that needs more support. And the participation of the EIF, it's a sort of stamp of quality, which reassure also maybe others to contribute and to participate. And actually what we see in the end is not, the real investment that we do, but, the whole amount of capital that we are able to raise through our participation. We are quite, picky. Our due diligence is not very easy. Some of you, I guess, that already went through it. But in the end, I think that it's a good, ray radiography on the sounders of your fund, of your company. And so I think that in the end, it's a good contribution. Also because, I was listening to other interventions before me, and actually important is to understand what is the role of a public institution. Public institutions should not replace or substitute the markets or the entrepreneurs. They have to facilitate, to build a level playing field where everyone can participate and where entrepreneurs can have the ability to develop. But let's go also on the the less developed business area, and in particular, there is this formidable, I would say, instrument which comes through the European Innovation Council. And there is the European Innovation Fund, which is managed by the Commission, and where the EIB acts as an advisor in doing yes.
Thank you so much, Gelsomina. I have now a quick question to you, Ale. So